to the Riff Show. Welcome to the Riff Show. Are we on the Riff Show? Are we welcome to the Riff Show. Hey, how's it going, guys? Welcome to the Riff Show. This is the show that people have been waiting for. This is the show that we discuss what? What are we discussing?
25 great Keith riffs.
That's the old. Well, we're going to make a start, aren't we?
Yeah. some of yours and mine might cross over. That's okay.
I don't have a problem with that. I'm just going to be honest with some of the choices that I'm going to talk about.
Cool.
Hold on, buddy. I'll just check to see if anybody is online watching with us. Nobody is online, and that I can see. Hold on, mate. How's your day been?
Not bad, yeah, but wet.
Yeah, well, that's the situation that we've got here in New Zealand. I've spoken to a couple of my North American friends, and you know, it's funny because you're talking to them and they're complaining about the weather,
about the heat,
and how hot it is, and you and I are complaining about the rain and how cold it is. So we've got nobody in the chat. I'll just say, are you watching the chat? Can you see the chat?
I'm still using my phone.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was hoping that you could use the chat so that if I fall out, I've updated my modem, so hopefully that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
But we'll see. We'll see if it does. Hope everyone is okay. So I'm just putting a message there in the chat, mate, just in case someone pops in. So I was if you can you maybe get the chat going so that you can participate in the chat too, mate. That'll be a good thing later on, because there's been a couple of questions in the chat directed to you too. So
cool.
Without me going through telling you what's going on in the chat, you can read it yourself.
Yeah, that's good. Keith riff hard, goes without saying.
Yeah. I gave it some thought over the week. Played a couple of riffs. Tried to work it out. Like you, I suppose there's a heck of a lot to pick, isn't there?
Well, I'm pretty the 25 I've picked I've gone in chronological order, and it kind of paints a picture of how each album goes by. They became more independent and a lot stronger and a lot more original in their own sound.
Awesome. I'm going to do a shout out because Mad Dog is saying, hey, Fender Buddy. He's a good friend of ours. He's been watching some of our recorded shows, so it's really good that he's popped on to say g'day to us. Mad Dog is in Aussie, so he's a cousin. He's not far from us. So thanks for joining us, Mad Dog.
Great name.
You want to see some of his comments on the Johnny Bean show, mate? It's well suited. Mad Dog certainly is, as his name is. And he won't mind me saying that. I mean that affectionately. Yeah. Okay. So I interrupted you, mate. And I'm sorry. I have a bad habit of doing that.
Oh, whatever. Yeah, it's your show. No, I just thought the way to honor, I think, Keith's riffs would be to myself personally would be to go through them chronologically, simply by watching the growth and And as we realised, between the classic period, Beggars Banquet, to Exile, that 4 or 5 year period, the riffs were coming through left, right, and centre. And then even after that classic period, right up to Undercover the Night, the band was pretty much, their signature sound was pretty much behind Keith's rhythm guitar. I think, a good portion of their music was based around Keith's riffing. But that early period, obviously, they were copying songs and doing covers and working out their own melodies and doing chord progressions. Not a whole lot of real riffs started to appear till the Beggars Banquet period, really. Because a lot of people get riffs, melodies, and licks all confused. A riff, to me, is a driving rhythm, something catchy, a punch, where a melody is something that's quite catchy and melodic. And a lick is obviously lead guitar based, which still can be a catchy thing for a song. So when I think of riffs, I want to think of Keith's driving guitar, or at least a bit of punch.
Oh, I'm not going to argue with you. I think you're right. A riff is that driving. I'm going to use a whole lot of terms here that I probably shouldn't be using because I don't know if they're correct, but that a percussive, a beat. That's what I understand a riff to be.
Yep.
I haven't gone chronological at all. I've picked the songs that. Well, I'm going to discuss 3 songs if we get a chance in this segment of the show. I've picked 3 songs that were the songs that I fell in love with, the riffs that I heard and thought, wow. And when we get to calling them out, a lot of people won't be surprised. But that's what I've done. I've gone with the riffs that I went, wow,
cool.
So kick it off, mate. What have you got there?
So the bulk of the riffs I've chosen have been Stones originals. There's a few exceptions where they've reworked some covers, but that helped create that sound. And they're all pretty much Keith riffs, obviously. I mean, I did a bit of background check. There's a riff that I wanted to use from Black and Blue, but it'll turn out to be a Ron Wood riff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So a lot of the interweaving, got to be careful because it's other guys doing it.
What was that riff? Can I ask?
Hey Negrita. It's great. Oh, but it was Ron Wood brought that to the table for the Black and Blue sessions, but we'll talk about that later. But the first riff that I'm going to use, which basically opened the doors to the whole world for the Rolling Stones to enter, was the reworking of Route 66, first song on their first album. So that song basically was kind of like a jazz standard in the 40s. I think Bobby Troop wrote it. And then Chuck Berry did a neat version, but the Stones really gave it a bit of a push, a real drive. And that became the Stones' signature sound, that first song, because you had the 2 guitars, really tidy drumming from Charlie, and obviously swinging bass line, and just a love affair, obviously, that song, because they hadn't been to America yet, but they were living their life through that song. So, yeah, Route 66, what a great song. And in the key of A, a good rock song. But the way that Keith does that initial rhythm at the start kind of paved the way to what he was going to be doing in the future. A 19, 20-year-old. Great. I love it. What a way to kick off a career, Route 66.
Oh, I agree with you. And one of his heroes, well, probably one of the biggest heroes would be who wrote that song?
Bobby Troop.
And who made it famous?
Well, Chuck Berry gave it a good.
Chuck Berry, yeah.
Chuck Berry gave it a good. It was on one of his albums. So obviously they would have heard the Chuck Berry version, and then they just typical Stones just gave it a bit more of a rocky edge. obviously helped having two guitars. Brian Jones does fantastic rhythm, but what a soundtrack to America through those lyrics, and just great riffing, just a real neat riff.
Oh, I agree with you. You know, Keith Richards in his book, and I think, you know, Paul McCartney says the same thing. They went to the movies and they were watching American movies, and everything was in color, and all these records were full of color, and the music that they were hearing was music of color, and that contrasted remarkably with the black and white coldness that they were experiencing in England at that time. So no wonder that music had a compelling push and attraction for them.
Oh, you had the drive-through movies, and the hot rods, and the colourful cars, and the white sand, and the beaches in California, and it would have been a mecca.
So I wonder what the black guys, you know, the black people in the southern states of America were thinking when they were picking cotton. Did they ever get an opportunity, you think, to see this part of America? Were they going to the movies, you know, like a young Keith Richards, and seeing this part of America at all?
Good question. I don't know. The reason why church was so important to them in those days, because Sunday they had some time off and they can dress up in nice clothes. I imagine they would go to the movies, but obviously everything would have been segregated.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know much about it. The Deep South, and all I know is that a lot of our blues heroes came from, and there's actually a map that you can buy. It's basically a square mile footage concentrated area in Mississippi where all the greats came from. It's like, certain part of Mississippi which was born out of great blues heroes. But to them, the way that the Stones would have been falling in love with America, those blues guys would have fallen in love with the big cities, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's no arguments from me with your analysis of Route 66. You know, you listen to that song now, and it's it certainly has some energy, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And you find when people release an album, the first song's got to be really, really strong, because that's your introduction to the band, to the album and the band.
So, what year did they release that album, that song? Was it 60?
February 64.
64. So they were doing. So just hold on, mate. I just want to see what gear, if this is going to give us a outline of. So 64, Keith was using, it looks like a harmony.
Probably some little humbuckers on that harmony.
What's interesting, though, and you've mentioned this before, is there's a shot here of Brian Jones with that Gretsch. Not fade away, just hold Stones of Mania. So here, another shot of Brian using a Gretsch. King B. Yes, so it looks like most of the shots here just show Keith using that harmony, and Jones with that beautiful
white Gretsch.
Gretsch.
Yep. Well,
so and Vox amps. So yeah, that's good. That's good. And here's another thing here too, mate. Look, they were being endorsed back then. Here's an endorsement for
harps.
A Hona harp.
Why not?
Yeah. So just before you get onto your second song, mate, I just want to check. So Mad Dog is saying that Ron Wood is underrated.
Mm.
And of course, we're not going to disagree with that. And he makes another comment here saying these old blues bands of colour never got to play in any big clubs because it was only white people. Well, that's right. Yeah. It wasn't, ironically, it wasn't until the British bands came to America that opened up the doors for these black guys.
Yeah, they would have played at what they call fish fries and jerk joints.
Yep. And what's a honky tonk then? Is that where is a honky tonk where the white farmers hung out?
Yeah, honky tonkin', yep. So, yeah, the blacks would have done the fish fries and the jerk joints, which is probably after church, Sunday afternoon, rip it up.
And drink some moonshine and have a good time.
Yep. Yeah. No, it would have been some good times. So, yeah. So that whole first period, I was just reviewing some of their albums, and a whole bunch of great covers of Sam Cooke and the Drifters, Under the Boardwalk, and as we know, Chuck Berry covers, but they weren't really riffing at that time. I was going to mention an underrated song called An Empty Heart, but we'll skip that. So my next Keith riff, I just the first period that they were doing, they were really just discovering themselves through covers. Really, they weren't really riffing. Second song I'd like to mention, which came out on the Aftermath, which was their first album where they wrote every song and they're getting a lot more confident. And some of these songs were actually turned into riffs later on during live shows, but especially the 81 tour where they opened up the whole tour with this song, Under My Thumb. What a great riff. You talk about punch and catchy. Obviously the xylophone was at the start, but in the live shows they skipped the xylophone and just that really dun 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 dun. Awesome. I mean, a whole tour they opened up with that song. And of course,
what's interesting on that period then is Keith is using a Les Paul then.
Yep.
And there's a lot of shots with Brian using a Firebird.
Right. That would have been 66. Yeah, Royal Albert Hall. That was that time that he used the Firebird. Yep. I think he had. That was the first inclination where he brought out, especially with the European tour, late 66, early 67. He had the black Les Paul with 3 pickups, I think.
Yeah, I think that came out. I think that was late, certainly not in early 66. He's using a Sunburst in early 66. And what's Brian using? Not Brian. Sorry, Bill's using a Guild bass. Yeah. And again, they're using Bill's foundation was using a Fox foundation, but Brian and Keith were using Fender Showman amps. So, yeah, we've talked about that before, about how critical that was to their sound, wasn't it?
Yeah, gave them a lot more volume for sure. I mean, Fender had room to move.
So, it's interesting that you've picked Under My Thumb, because I'll tell you something. I like the original version that they did. I like that. But jeepers, that live version that they did on Give Me Shelter.
That's right.
Oh, I love that version.
Altamont.
I love that version. That's my favourite version of the song. They've slowed it down a bit.
Yes. And the other thing too, I've got the Get Your Yayas Out box set that came out. You've got it. It didn't make the album, but it made, obviously, the box set 30 years later. And that's not a bad version too at Madison Square Garden. Really good intro from Billy Wyman and Charlie Watts getting the groove going.
Oh, man, it's phenomenal.
It's incredible.
Yeah, if people are watching this and they haven't seen that, it'll be on YouTube somewhere. Yeah, you need to check it out. It's
Yep, you bring up a good point. Because I talked about the '81 tour where they opened up the whole tour with that song, but that was a staple on their '69 tour. They played that every concert. So obviously the Stones love to play it, and it's just a groovy song with a great riff. So yeah, love it.
what's your third song, mate?
So this song here, the original obviously is a piano intro, but once again they've incorporated the hook into their live sound, and once again it was a big part of the '81 tour. And I love to play it on guitar myself personally. Let's spend the night together.
Yeah.
See, that's the great thing about the Stones is nothing is off limits. You can start out with a bit of a piano hook, but the way that they rework them, they can riff them into their concerts.
Yeah, that's certainly one that upset the parents, didn't it?
Well, there's that famous clip where it was on the Ed Sullivan Show. It was bleeped out the night. They wanted him to say time, and Mick said, "No, I'm saying night." Let's spend some time together.
Hey, we were talking about Keith's Les Paul Custom a couple of minutes ago. Here it is here.
Okay. Yep.
Here, called the Fretless Wonder.
Nice.
And according to this information here, he acquired that and used it on the Ed Sullivan Show in September '66.
Yep.
There's a guy that watches our channel. His name is JJ. He's an English guy living in the States. And JJ's got a Les Paul Custom.
Yep.
His dad gave it to him, and I think it's a '68.
Wow.
Yeah. It's it's my Les Paul, and he's looking after it for me.
Because I think Les Paul went down the road a little bit like Fender in the '70s. They got a bit heavy and a bit silly, didn't they?
Well, guys who have got, there was something about the wood apparently, and I'm a tone wood guy. I was on another show last night participating in the chat, and one guy popped on there and said that wood has nothing to do with the tone of a guitar, and he got shot down by a majority of the other guys. But I'm going to stick by what a lot of experts say in my own experiences. I think wood does make a difference, and I think JoJo was saying something about the guitar that he's got. The wood makes a difference because he's played other models.
Yeah.
And it sounds remarkably different. So.
Yeah, that's interesting.
What a guitar, though. What a guitar.
You like guitar, you care about tone. At least I do.
Yeah. I've never played a Les Paul Custom. I'm too scared. Scared to.
I'm led to believe it's the upper end of the Les Paul line is the 3 pickup.
Have you played one?
No, I don't think so. What was one that Randy Rhoads used and Peter Frampton? A lot of those guys, they had the white ones with the gold toggle switch. They had 3 pickups.
Yeah, mate, I don't know.
They're a lot thicker, I think.
I don't know. If anyone's in the chat that can answer that question, or wants to make a comment if they watch the show after Carl and I have logged off, yeah, I'm sure there's a couple of guys that can answer that question.
So we're doing pretty good for time getting these riffs out of the way. I just keep going.
Yeah.
You want to do like I'll do 5, then you do 5, or?
Yeah. Well, I've only got 3 to talk about.
Okay.
Right, because I didn't think we were going to get past two.
Uh,
That's good.
yeah. Well, the next one, I mean, obviously, that to summarise, let's spend the night together. And it became a feature of their live shows. Let's face it. I mean, everybody loves it. Catchy song, good riff. Everybody.
What about the lyrics though? That did that upset some people?
I mean, imagine in the mid '60s, conservative America, it would have been pushing the envelope. But I mean, spend the night together. I mean, they might have had a rumpus. I mean, a sleepover or birthday party or something. What can mean a lot of things. Spending the night together, just crashing out.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about the Stones being at that stage, probably not knowing it, but speaking on behalf of a generation that was ripping themselves away from everything that preceded that generation, I suppose.
Well, in the late '50s, Everly Brothers, I think, did a song called was it "Wake Up, Little Susie, We Got to Go Home." That was pretty controversial in the late '50s because if you read the lyrics, wake up, Susie, we got to go home. I got to take you home. So the Americans are doing it before the Poms.
All right, that's pretty cool.
Great song.
Yeah, what's the next one?
So we're going in chronological order, obviously. So that's an interesting period, '66. So I've just got one song from Satanic Majesties, and I think it's highly underrated album. I mean, there is a little bit of what's the best word to describe it? A little bit of experimentation and stuff that hasn't actually stood the test of time, but quite a neat song. Citadel, great riff.
Yeah.
Great riff. Just a simple chord progression, 4 chords. E minor, A, D, and E. Beautiful.
I'm going to go back and listen to that because it's been a long time, my friend, since I've heard that. So I appreciate you drawing my attention to it because...
Yeah. Well, I want to pick out nuggets that I'm not going to focus on all the big time heavyweight riffs that we come to know and love. I mean, we all love them, but I want to pick out a few nuggets that maybe members of the audience or people don't know of.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm just sorry to... you can carry on. I'm just going to go to that album now.
Yeah. And on that same album, but I think it's more of a bit more of a melody chord progression. There is a bit of driving there, but
Yeah, okay, yeah, yep. I know the song. Yeah.
It's neat.
Yeah.
There's a neat song on there also, but I haven't mentioned it. I'll quickly talk about it. 2000 Man, which Kiss did a cover of 1979.
Yes.
That's a great song.
On Dynasty.
Yeah, Dynasty. Yeah. It's not really a riff song, but it's just one of the forgotten about nuggets that's actually on that particular album. But yeah, Citadel. I mean, they're starting to get that sound going. Obviously, nothing's open tuning yet. And then, so that's pretty much, and then on to Beggar's Banquet, where we start to realize, hey, these guys are finding their own voice. So that first period, like I said, a lot of covers, a lot of reworking of the blues. They're trying to figure out some songwriting with Tell Me and stuff like that. And, but they're starting to, I guess in a way, Beggar's Banquet was the start where these guys were starting to sound like grown men, independent, strong guys. So just a simple riff, but effective for me, Parachute Woman.
Oh, yeah.
Just basic chords. Dun, 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 dun.
Oh, that album's just phenomenal. I
Yeah.
just, yeah, I can't get enough of that album.
And just goes to show you don't need a that album's famous because of the lack of amplification. He had an acoustic with a pickup going into a tape recorder.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah. And what's interesting about that album, and I'm glad you've brought it up, is that there's no open G songs on that album at all.
Wow.
Uh, Sympathy for the Devil is in standard.
Yep.
No Expectations is an open E.
Yep.
Dear Doctor is standard in E. Parachute Woman is standard.
Yep.
Jigsaw Puzzle Blues is the electric is an open E, and the acoustic is standard.
Yep.
Then we get on to some of the side two, which is Street Fighting Man, open D.
Yep.
Prodigal Son, which is open E.
Yep.
Stray Cat Blues, open D.
Yep.
Factory Woman, standard. And then Salt of the Earth in open E.
Mm.
Phenomenal album.
Yep. Yep. I was starting to get some riffing going on, some serious riffing. And as we know, the comeback album, the first album, the start of their great period where they were pretty much unstoppable, and that gave them the foundation to do those big tours.
Yeah, and you and I touched on this a couple of times. Mr. Jimmy certainly has a big part to play
Jimmy
in
Miller.
the development of that album, because there's a tone about it. Most of the songs are in E.
Unbelievable.
Starts off in E, goes to C, E, D, and then back to E. It's just, so when you sit and listen to that whole album,
Mm-hmm.
and you and I again have discussed this many times, you sit down and you listen to a whole album.
Yeah.
You're listening to a ride, a trip, and an experience, and that's exactly the way that they produced that album and picked those songs to follow that method. The whole sequence is just not a mistake. It's not like, oh, we'll draw these names out of the hat and this song will go there and we'll pick. There's a lot of intelligence, artistic intelligence that goes into these records. That's mind blowing.
Yeah. Especially like, for example, the sympathy for the rock kind of a groove, and then all of a sudden they slowed down with the country song, then sped up again, then slowed down. And the other thing I like about Beggars Banquet, because I mentioned before that Citadel, a lot of the stuff on Satanic, there was a lot of overdubbing and exotic instruments. It's almost overproduced. Where Beggars Banquet's pretty much stripped down right to the bones, right to the core. Not a whole lot of overdubbing, and just back to the basics, really. And I'll close out with this last song because I've spoken too much, and it coincides with that particular album. But it just goes to show you how the Stones are very clever at reworking old standards. I really, really like Prodigal Son. I like the story. I like the way that Keith reworked it. I like the way that Keith introduced the whole world to these unknown blues guys that were heavyweights. Reverend Robert Wilkins. And he, later on in these guys' career, they got big royalties from these songs, which is great. They got to buy a new car or pay off a house or whatever. And, the way that the Stones covered these songs, they covered them very tastefully. They didn't ruin them. They didn't massacre them. They kept it acoustic and kept it very respectful.
For sure. And Keith never said that he wrote these songs like other British guys did at that time. You know, they stood out clearly on the mountain and said,
Yeah.
these guys wrote these songs, and this is our interpretation of it. And Keith was so happy to even be considered in league with these guys, to be able to do that and give that to other people to listen to. That in itself was just mind blowing for Keith. And he, again, you know, you and I had a conversation earlier
Yep.
offline, talking about how important Keith's book is, his biography, life, and he clearly states that many times in his book. And again, that's a tribute to the sincerity that the Rolling Stones had for their legacy.
Absolutely.
For their predecessors.
Yeah, and the simple fact that they did Love in Vain gave the record company the inspiration to do Robert Johnson Volume 2, which that's a testimony not only to the body of work of Robert Johnson, but unfortunately how underrated he was, and how these record companies weren't really in the know. It's a testimony of the Stones for picking out these gems and, you know, these rough diamonds, and just polishing them up and exposing us to, hey, listen, you know what? We love the Stones, but we actually we're learning a lot about who wrote these songs through the Stones. Bring people out of the vault. So, yeah.
Well, there's a quote here that I'd like to use to reinforce what you're saying, mate. And you know, this is what Keith's saying when he's trying to talk about what they were trying to do when they were recording Beggar's Banquet. And this is what he said: what we're looking for is power and force without volume, and inner power, a way to bring together what everybody in that room is doing to make one sound. It's not two guitars, piano, bass, and drum. It's one thing. It's not five.
Yep.
You're there to create one thing.
Cool.
Yeah, and I understand what he's trying to do, you know. Can I just interrupt you, mate? We've got one of our friends who joins us. Oh gosh, Tubinin. Hey, I'm sorry if I've pronounced your name wrong. And he said that he loves Keith and Hail Rock and Roll. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Where you see how important his Chuck Berry influence was. Absolutely. That's a great film. I love it when Keith is being told how to play that lick by Chuck, and the camera pans and you catch Keith's face who's been told off. No, you play it this way. That's fantastic.
The slur went down, not up. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a gem of a documentary. I mean,
And that's certainly Chuck Berry putting Keith Richards in his place. hey, I wrote the song. I think he says something like that, doesn't he? I should know. I wrote it all.
No. Keith back chatted back to Chuck in front of Eric Clapton and said, "Well, you wrote it."
Oh yeah. It's a gem. Yeah. That wasn't scripted, man. That's not scripted.
Everybody was on fine form then.
Yeah. Carol was the song. Yeah. You're right. Yeah, Carol. Play it like Chuck Berry plays it.
Well, it's interesting to see that I know that Eric brought out that big ES 175, but rehearsing, they were pretty much Keith and Eric were pretty much happy, content with their Stratocasters. So
yeah.
No, it's a very neat, just a great show. And Keith pulled it off, which wasn't easy, I reckon.
No.
Because Chuck is very much a one-man band. He is the lead. He's the guy that wrote it. He's the main man. He's the band. He is everybody. And he'll let you know. So strong personality, headstrong. But if he's a blueprint of rock and roll, why not?
Oh man, I just he's phenomenal. There's another film where it just shows him flying in to gigs with a hired band there, and all these guys standing there. They want to say, "Hey," he doesn't want to talk to them. Just hurry up, let's go play the gig. Where's the money? Is it true? Is it true that he insisted he got paid in cash for a long time?
At the start of the show too, not after. Yeah. So what he'd do? He was very streamlined. He'd pack a couple of guitars, one set of clothes, a toothbrush, a comb, and any pickup band that was available at the night, whether it be the house band at that pub, or some guys down the street, or some guys they met at the bus station. And there were some horrible shows, and there were some good shows. But yeah, Chuck, you would have been around. I was probably about 10, but there was a triple billing in Auckland, no joke. And the backing band I don't think was that great. Chuck Berry, Bo Diddley, and Jerry Lee Lewis all came together on the same bill and played in Auckland. Unbelievable. Late 80s.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine that?
Yeah, well, that completely went over my head back then. I was, I was listening to a lot of other stuff, and it certainly wasn't the music. The idea of me going to a Chuck Berry show back then would have been the last thing on my list, to be fair.
Yeah. Well, because we're all learning that all the dots connect. We've talked about Van Halen, we've talked about Guns N' Roses, we've talked about a lot of these bands we love, and then you start to read who wrote the song, which you can learn. That's why buying albums is great. You read the back liner notes, and all of a sudden, Berry, who's Berry? And then all of a sudden, Chuck Berry. Wow, okay. So this wasn't a Van Halen song. This was actually a cover, or So
well,
yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you mentioned 2000 Man. So I knew who the Stones were at the time when Dynasty came out, and I remember it would have been 79, and I remember that I was made for loving you, baby. That was their number one song. Right. And I think that was number one here in New Zealand for 6 weeks in a row.
Wow.
And I remember going to my nana's place, and this was the nana with my uncle who schooled me into this type of music. So I knew who the Stones were. But I remember he'd bought that album Dynasty.
Yeah.
And I remember putting the record on and looking at it and reading it, and it said 2000 Man, Richards, Jagger. And I remember, oh, shivers, Keith Richards. Okay, so I went through the record collection to find out which album that song was on, and played the first time of my life the Satanic Majesties.
Oh wow! Yep.
I didn't like it.
There's a bit of pop on there, but
yeah. Well, I was how 12, 13. There was a lot of stuff on there. I just didn't get it, I suppose. But I remember that there are certain things that you remember. But that was my introduction into that album, Satanic Majesties.
Oh yeah. No, that's it's an interesting middle period. Obviously, trying to channel that Sgt. Pepper psychedelia thing. Thank God that those shut the doors on that and got back to rock and blues. That there was a quick death, that one.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Interesting chapter in their musical development. Certainly. What the power of music was certainly back then, and the movement that music was. And if you were a top lining or an influential artist, you rode some of these waves, and thankfully that wave crashed on the beach and didn't continue.
Psychedelia has no roots. It's basically up in the clouds where the blues and rock and jazz has roots. It's rooted in spirituals, folk songs, storytelling, blues, church songs, you know, a little bit of Western swing, you know, a little bit of rockabilly. It's got roots. Working.
Well, that's why Cream's album Disraeli Gears is still so good, because you know a lot of that album is a reworking of blues songs.
Yep.
Again, during the height of the psychedelic period.
Yeah. Which was at its peak in '67.
Yeah. When did that album come out? '67?
Yeah. Everything came
Yeah.
out in '67. Hendrix came on the scene. Cream's Disraeli Gears, '67. Pink Floyd, is it Pipers at the Gates of Dawn?
Revolver.
Jefferson Starship.
Wow.
Everything came out '67.
Wow.
Everyone was trying to do their own little psychedelic trip. And to some bands, it was their... they couldn't do it. Dave Clark 5, they were all trying to wear paisley shirts. They just couldn't pull it off. So, yeah. But thank God for Beggar's Banquet. Everything went back to normal. Because, I mean, if they tried to do another psychedelic album, it would have been Shut the Gate.
Well, so again, you know, we have to thank whoever for putting, and I'm sure that the information's out there, for putting Keith, but I think it was Mick, onto Jimmy Miller. I think somebody put Mick onto, because he had just produced
Spencer Davis, wasn't he? He did some work with Traffic.
And Traffic, yeah. And they had a lot of respect for Steve Winwood. You know, he was you know, the new kid on the block, the child prodigy. So yeah, certainly I don't think we can discount or discredit his involvement and his direction into putting that band on that direction. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, because prior to, see, Andrew Luke Oldham tried to do the producing and did some okay work. Satanic was produced entirely by Mick and Keith. And obviously, Beggar's Banquet, they needed some new energy, some guidance, some direction, some professionalism. So Jimmy Miller was the guy. You know, and it's like all of us. Sometimes we need a good kick up the rear to say, you know, let's get back to the basics.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Keep it simple. So, I'm done with my riffs. I you know, there's a few standards there which we all know about, a few hidden gems, and I'll continue mine next week.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm just mindful of the time too. I'm looking at the time, my friend. So I brought a guitar to talk about my riffs. And the first riff, I suppose, I fell in love with was Honky Tonk Woman. I don't know if you can hear that.
Yeah, sounds good.
But just hearing this, I just again, I would have heard that song on the radio, Carl, and I remember hearing that, thinking, wow. There's a couple of riffs I remember. I remember hearing that. I remember hearing the Beatles Come Together. I remember being young hearing that. And I remember Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Sweet Judy Blue Eyes. Yeah.
Very good.
And I would have been, you know, 5 or 6, but I remember hearing those, and at Honky Tonk Woman. And again, when I started playing the guitar, trying to work out how to play it, and it wasn't until 10 years ago, 8 years ago, where I thought that I should try and learn open G.
Yep.
That I thought, wow, that's it. And from a guitar playing point of view, it's different from a lot of things that I play because it forces you to slow down.
Well,
you know, playing an open G, it's forcing you to. Oh, sorry, and then you're going. Yeah, I love it because I heard it early on in my life and fell in love with it, and fell in love with it again when I started to learn open G tuning, and I just love it. So that's probably one of the first riffs I play when I pick up my Telecaster is that riff. The second riff that I've picked is Tumbling Dice, and again, when I was learning open G, and then you have to work out again how Keith uses a capo to get a various chord, and then just going playing that B chord. Again, forcing me as a guitar player to slow down because my natural reaction was always to be, and you and I have spoken about this together, you know, because, you know, if people don't know it, Carl's a very good guitar player, and I've learned a lot from Carl. But playing open G forced me to slow down, and in turn forced me to slow down in my hearing of what I was listening to. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. What you find with those particular riffs, and obviously very much rhythm based, and Keith said it many a time, he's not a great lead guitar player, and that's what draws you in, is it's all about the groove. We can attach the word groove to riff.
Yes.
It's Chuck Berry slowed down, but a lot of that sound they got, well, Keith would have been all those months on end, years on end, with Brian Jones learning Jimmy Reed songs, because less is more. It was the space in between the notes, not the notes themselves, that drew you in. And that's where you get the swing and the groove.
Oh, and absolutely.
Honky Tonk Woman and Tumbling Dice, and Keith's mentioned on an interview, and I'm pretty sure you would have, they said, what's one of your favourite songs to play live? And he says, well, I like Tumbling Dice. And they said, why? And he says, oh, it's just a particular groove. So,
well, absolutely, because that groove is. So getting back to the opening of the show where you're talking about a riff and saying it's percussive, it's that driving thing, you can see now by playing open G how important that is when you consider the relationship between Keith being the guitar player and Charlie being the drummer, because we're well aware that with the Stones, who follows who they're not following Charlie, are they?
It's something quite unique. Yeah,
they're following the guitar player,
which is a lot different to how other bands play.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of bands, follow the singer and the band's, Keith's almost like the conductor, really. And that's once again, the Stones created their great sound based around these, for lack of a better word, but an important word, simple but effective riffs. And it just goes to show you that being technical is actually the opposite of creating a good riff. Simplicity is where it's at. Because that time that you played Open G, and I said, and you showed me the start me up chords, it's like, is that it?
Yeah.
And just hammer on, hammer off.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what it's like for me too, and that's why I like some books. When some books talk about some of the music, some of the bands I like, if it's written by a guy that understands the music or understands the guitar, he's going to give you an insight that a journalist will miss. They'll see the field, but they won't see the grass.
Yeah.
They won't know the type of grass that they're walking on, which is what you and I, and hopefully people that watch our show, want to know. They want to know what that grass is, what type of grass, what's the gravel, what's this type of tree, and having to go back and learn these riffs in the way that Keith wrote them was a thrill,
And we see how the sound evolved. We started out with Route 66. Is everything right?
Oh yeah, I agree with you.
But everything was in standard tuning.
Yep.
And they started to, obviously, with Biggest Banquet, start to play around a bit. But by the time when you mentioned things like Tumbling Dice, especially, by the time 72 came around, he pretty much arrived at his signature sound, which is Open G, Telecaster, and groovy riffs.
Yep.
Where he was knocking out riffs left, right, and centre from there on. So from Route 66 all the way up to Tumbling Dice, we're talking about a guy that really, really evolved. And what's important though is he never forgot where he came from. So behind the tele and the 5 strings and the Open G, there's still that boogie riff, that boogie sound of that bluesy Jimmy Reed, Chuck Berry, which you mentioned.
Yeah, well, I'm just a simple guitar player, and I remember watching a YouTube clip a few years ago when I was attempting to start to play Open G, and I remember this guy was trying to talk about how you have to play behind the beat, because that's what Keith does. That's what the Stones do.
Yep.
And it can fall apart. And then obviously you read Keith's biography, and he talks about that too. And then Charlie talks about that as well, in that 2010 DVD that came out celebrating Exile on Main Street, saying the same thing, that it can fall apart at any point. So again, it shows the responsibility that that Keith has, the love that he has of the music, because many people have said, and I wonder if he still does it, but there was a period where all he was doing was walking around with a guitar. People, if you didn't see Keith Richards with a guitar, people would go, wow, he hasn't got his guitar with him.
Yeah. He I imagine it would have been like playing all over again once he discovered Open G and all the riffs and just the mountain of music that was, to him, would have been unheard of till he discovered it, that he had a new platform to work from.
I'm going to admit something here on the show, and I'm a bit embarrassed to say it, but I'll tell you, when I tuned my guitar to Open G, and realize that that was that's a chord, and all you had to do was do that, and then go here, do the same thing. Sorry. I thought it can't be that simple. Do you understand what I mean? It can't be. I'm making a hash of it, but a guitar player knows what I'm talking about. I remember thinking it can't be that, just a matter of putting your finger there and going like that. But it is.
Simple as best.
But it is.
Our minds, when we hear something good, and this is how my mind works, you automatically think that must be hard. But why do we overthink things? That's why Jimmy Reed and Eddie Taylor was so important, because the mileage they got out of just E, A, and B,
yep,
playing behind the beat and the groove in between, and some of those little hooks that they did, is just, yeah.
Well, Michael B in the chat is agreeing with us, which is great. Thanks, Michael. But the tuning has unique drone tones as well, and absolutely. And you know, if I was a better guitar player, you know, I would turn it up. And but you're right. You strum an open G, and then you play G, an open G. It's completely different. It's just, and then obviously Keith goes into some of the insights about it in his biography. He gives a few pages where he talks about, you know, discovering it and the drone note, and that's what I've done here too. I've taken away the bottom E, so we just have the 5 strings here, so that we can just not get that one that's normally tuned, I think, in D.
Quite flat.
Yeah. So we've just pulled that off.
Oh wow.
But yeah, that drone tone. And that's why that beat is so important, because to make it sound good, you got to have that. What do you call it, Carl? Swing.
Swing, yes. Or a groove.
Yeah. If you don't have the swing or the groove, it sounds like shite.
So what's your last one? We've got to close out.
Yeah. So Michael B's saying I need to read that. Yeah, you do. You do, my friend. Check it out. It's available on digital if you want. It's on Amazon or iTunes books. Yeah, certainly. It gives you an insight and an appreciation into why it means so much to Keith. And if you're a guitar player, yeah, it'll help you. And you'll certainly want to set up a guitar and keep it permanently in open G.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk on days, months, years on that, but we just got to appreciate the simple fact that they gave it to us, and it's just known out. I mean, Black Crowes. I mean, let's not get too far off topic, but Black Crowes. Obviously, some of their signature songs are based around that sound.
Oh, absolutely. So so it's let's see if I can remember it. And then he goes, and then with the slide, yeah, I can't remember, but yeah, you're right. It's who's that guy? Scott? Who's the guitar player, the blondie in that band?
Chris Robertson.
Chris Robertson, yeah, outstanding guitar player.
Twice as hard, jealous.
Yeah, that whole album is phenomenal, just brilliant.
Basically, it's basically like a modern version of Exile in a way, you know.
See if I can remember it. You know something? When that album came out, 91,
Yep, I think so. Yep.
I heard that song and I thought that sounds different. I didn't know at the time, but you know when you hear something, it's like, I've heard this before.
Yeah.
I couldn't put my finger on it back then. Because it took me a couple of years to work it out.
No, I'm proud of those guys.
Yeah. Cheapers. I'm sorry. To Binin. Chris Robertson. That's correct. Monster guitar player. Love the Talkers cheap solo. Keith Project so much. Take It So Hard. That's awesome. Struggle. How I Wish. Great open G songs. That Take It So Hard. Oh. Yeah. Oh. Yeah. What a. Yeah. Did we tell you guys that we're Keith nuts? Just in case you didn't know. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a Keith tattoo. Eh?
Well, at least start with a skull ring.
Well, if it's any consolation, I've got that to go with my Saint Benedict medal. Yeah, the tone. Yeah, that tone. Yeah, absolutely. A tally through a 50-watt Marshall. My gosh. Yeah. And that's what Carl and I particularly love, because, you know, I said many times, you know, Carl's a guitar player too. You know, there's just nothing like cranking and playing a few chords and just feeling that come out through your amp. It's just phenomenal. Hey, my friend, it's time for me to go.
So you've done 2 riffs. You want to save your third till next week, do you?
I'm going to. Well, I think this show's going to. Well, this is a series. If you have a look in the description, I've called it a series because it's not going to be one show.
Oh, neat. So you asked a few for next week because I got 2, 4, 6, and you got 2 underway. So neat. We've got a good start.
Well, are we still on for Wednesday's show?
That's fine. Yep.
Yeah.
So what you can do if you want, kick it off. You can kick off the show with your riffs to catch up.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that most of my riffs were in standard tuning, and you touched on the open G stuff, so it was actually worked out really well.
Oh well, yeah. I like I said.
Best things
you've gone chronological, which is the scientific aspect of Carl. Carl is very scientific in his approach to a lot of things. The attention to detail is exquisite. And that's true. I just poked about with picking some of the songs that I just fell in love with. And you know, I had 10 and I had to narrow it down to 3. So I just went with it with the earliest ones I could remember.
Yeah, no, that's great, because I've actually 25 was a good number, because I mean obviously there's lots and lots out there, and I won't tell the audience or yourself what basically I've gone from obviously the first album right up to the period where I think that they were at their greatest, and it worked out really well. 25 was a good number.
So I'm just going to say thanks to Michael B, who's joined us in the chat. And he's shooting off. He's shooting the gap. Appreciate it, guys. You know, like I said before, Carl and I are just more than happy to take bit of time out from our own weekly schedule just to catch up together and just share our music and appreciation and love of the Stones. So the fact that some people around the world want to jump on board and join us just makes it even more enjoyable. There's a couple of shout outs I want to do. R2, R3, Lockie Nuts not here. I know where he is. He's watching the Johnny Bean show. There's a couple of other guys that probably would have been here, Carl, but Johnny Bean, he's doing a special show from NAMM, the Summer Festival, music show in America.
Yep.
Which is a really big deal for Guitar Nuts. So I just want to do a shout out to them because these guys have said some nice things and full of encouragement for Carl and I. Ben from Canucks with Guitars again always drops some nice comments in Messenger and offers a few things for us to improve the show. Carl and I are pretty happy with the way things are going. We're New Zealanders. We do things the New Zealand way, which is always functional. May not have a lot of form, but we certainly jump over those barricades and jump over those trenches, don't we?
Yep.
So I'm going to leave the final words as usual to the scientist. I mean, I'm going to pass over the last words to Carl. And again, Carl, look, once again, mate, appreciate your time.
Oh yeah. Hey, listen, it was a pleasure once again. Keith Richards, what else can you say? I mean, what a giant, and what an accident. We can go on about maybe how he discovered the open G through blues, or Roy Curtis showed him. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter because what Keith gave us is what matters.
Absolutely. Awesome.
That's all I got.
Okay, mate.
See ya.